Hey guys, welcome again. Mark here from Nomad Stays. Again, another part of the beautiful Rhone River. My trusty friend and colleague, Chief Happiness Officer Dakar, is behind me. He's just had a wonderful swim. Let's see if I can swing that around for you. Yes, this is the little creek that runs into the Rhone River, the bridge over to the next prefecture, the Ain prefecture. And as you can see, it's a stunning day here in the French Alps. Summertime, school holidays for Northern Hemisphere, 35 degrees heading up to today, feels just like home in Australia. And so I'm here to talk about future of travel, this week's episode, about what's happening. Well, don't know how close you're watching it, but things are changing really quickly. And it's getting a little bit murkier out there. You know, countries are opening, they're closing, there's outbreaks occurring that are having instantaneous effect on the ability to travel, the ability to cross countries. I'll give an example. As many of you know, we've got a motorbike sitting over in Bulgaria at the moment. We've been keen to get back there. It got locked in with the early winter. Keen to get back there and bring it back to France or somewhere here on the west. Last Wednesday, Bulgaria opened for Australians. Fantastic. But by Friday, they'd had an outbreak and most of the neighbouring countries had shut the borders to them. Okay, so I could get there, but couldn't get out. And but at the same time, there was that window of a gap, that little window of opportunity that allowed a couple of friends that have been stuck for COVID lockdown in Bulgaria for a number of months. They've managed to get themselves out to Croatia. Yeah, Troy was telling me that Australians were allowed into Croatia, which leads to the second point. There's some great websites out there giving you an update about which borders are open to who and how. And you'll remember that it depends on where you're coming from, what your residency is, and sometimes what your passport is. So, as it turns out, Australians are into Croatia at the moment. However, it's not being reported widely in the press. So another word of advice is to dig deeper, get your translator apps out to look at the websites from the various countries to be able to understand whether you're allowed to cross into those borders or not. It might not be public, it might not be in the news, you're probably going to have to go back to source documents. Here in Europe, which is the most open part of the world right now for travel, the information is very localised, it's very European focused, as you would expect. So a lot of countries are not listed in the media, but are allowed there are accepting people and nationalities. So, second big item this week has been the start of what looks like a bit of a race for remote workers and digital nomads. We've seen Barbados pre-announce and then announce the opening of a 12-month remote worker visa. You can travel to Barbados, sit yourself down there for a year, not have to worry extensively about visas, and work away at your job, at your business, and whatever. It's probably going to come with a couple of $1,000 worth of fees, but this is how the country makes its money. Now, the tourism's a little bit limited. I say that. It's great in some areas, and digital nomads are some of the most adventurous people around. They're out there crossing country borders, they're living, they're paying their way in different countries right now. Whereas a lot of domestic tourism or leisure tourism is still very domestic, and a lot of mainstream business still isn't crossing borders. That's even if they're allowed out of their countries. And as you've seen, there's a number of countries still with some pretty big lockdowns. My home country of Australia has just halved the numbers of flight arrivals to stop the excess hotel quarantine arrangements that have been used for the last couple of months. And that's probably as a response to the fact they can't get enough hotels with enough security guards that are well trained in health matters. There's been some outbreaks in Australia around these quarantine hotels, and for a country that was almost coronavirus free, it was very lightly touched, it's going through some pretty tough times. Down in the south there in Victoria, they almost hit 500 new cases last night, which is the equivalent of what here in France at 13 times the population also received yesterday. So France has made it mandatory to wearing masks inside open buildings. We've seen that with pretty much every shop insisting on it for a number of weeks, if not months now. And you're likely to see that happening in many other parts of the world. I see the great leader there in the States, Donald Trump, has started doing interviews with his mask on. So even the most virulent objectors are now starting to bend to the weight of this virus. It's not going away quickly. It's going to be here for a while. Just get used to it. Just look for those opportunities as we've been talking about the last little while. So this week, I'm going to talk to you about actually what Nomad Stays have been up to. So some of you have known me for many years. I've been in the travel industry and travel technology industry for more than 30 years. Had a range of outdoor adventure sort of companies. We still have some operations in the Sahara, for instance, and some small operations in Australia still. But what we did with Nomad Stays was that after becoming a digital nomad full-time about 5 years ago, we started realising how difficult it was to actually find somewhere to rent, somewhere to stay for about a month. You know, traditional rental accommodation, housing accommodation, would typically look for 6 months, if not 6 years worth of lease arrangements. And of course there's documentation, fees to pay, bonds to lodge, new electricity, new telephone, all that sort of stuff to get hooked up before you can even move in. Inspections, all of that. At the other end, the hotel industry was largely designed for an overnight market, so it was actually quite expensive. And some 13 years ago, we saw the start of Airbnb, where they sort of created a new range of short-term accommodation in private houses and apartments and accommodation around the world, to some extent going into competition with the mainstream travel industry. We took the different view, working in the travel industry for such a long time. We've been partnering with a range of properties. Now, some of those are apart hotels, and some of them are hostels. These days, there's a lot of co-living places opening up. A lot of hostels turning themselves into co-living as this sort of nomadic life starts to gather real momentum. You know, probably this time last year there was, pick a number, 3, 4, 5 million digital nomads around the world. Today that number of remote workers might be well over 100 million. And if they're travelling all year, they're spending a lot of money on somebody else's property. Really good market. So Nomad Stays, we've partnered with these hotels, and a lot of them haven't been doing that well even before COVID, particularly in regional areas. So we know regional areas are a real highlight for nomads and remote workers. It's a bit like being here on the Rhone River. You know, it's the town over yonder there is, I don't know, maybe 3,000 people, about half an hour's drive from a 50,000 person city. You know, not a big place, you can get in and out without too much trouble. There's enough sophistication, nightlife, bars, restaurants, theatres, you name it. There's enough going on in these sort of areas to really enjoy yourself. Yet, fresh air, wake up to the birds every day, and I'm looking at nature. You know, I'm looking at nature right now. I'm looking at the river. I can hear the traffic up there on the road, yes, but certainly a very pleasant environment to be working away. So nomads have been liking this environment. So we've got a range of these properties spread out around the world, and it's growing all the time. Currently we have about 1,000 beds spread across 23 countries. Not all of them normal prices that you'd expect to pay for Airbnb or even the hotels, because we've done a whole lot of negotiation. We've done arrangements so that when you come in for a month at a time, or even a week at a time, that's a lot more than a lot of these hotels and hostels and guest houses are used to. So they've been giving us some great prices, and we've turned that around to make it easy to book. No negotiations, no email trails backwards and forwards, no having to look at different websites and find out you missed out on this one, or it's sold to that one, or it was a walk-in, or none of that. We've just made it so that if it's available, bingo, you can book it straight away. And so that's what we've put together. We went live in February this year. We spent 9 to 12 months of last year moving from Australia to Europe, sitting down, building the tech. I've been driving my poor developers spare with changes of minds and things like that. And we kicked it off, started taking some bookings just before COVID hit. So it obviously got a little bit quiet, but now with the market so much bigger. It's starting to ramp up. And that's going to be really good for some of these countries like Barbados, because they have an underutilised tourism base, or a tourism infrastructure base. No obvious market coming from business or leisure necessarily. The conferences are probably not going to be held for a long time, so mass tourism's out, and they're looking for people to stay longer and spend something equivalent to what might have been spent in a week or two with a pure leisure traveller. So Barbados has really made some big news, but I see that shortly on their heels, Georgia, over in just south of the Caucasus Mountains, Georgia has opened up their own arrangements. They're pushing pretty heavily for the same thing. Lovely part of the world, Georgia. Crossed over there a few years ago, and had a good look around the country for a week or so, and it's really nice. Just a little bit about us as well. You may or may not have seen what we've been up to with our travels, but my co-founder and I, Linda, we're both world travellers. We've travelled, for me, more than 100 countries. Linda is sort of more than 50 countries around the world. And we do a lot of adventure sort of activity. So adventure motorcycling is one of our passions, hot air ballooning, and hanging out with people like that, which are the people that just find a way to make their travels exciting or adventurous. It's just purely entrepreneurialism. And there's some great stories when you deal with some well-experienced travellers about, have they crossed borders, forgot passports, had to bribe officials to get basics done, and strange arrangements that they've had to face around the world. And this stuff's not going to stop. It's an exciting part of the world. The recovery's going to take a while. Countries and people are not quite sure what to happen. And the adventurous amongst us are going to head out there and explore more of that. So we have a lot of adventure tied into Nomad Stays, because we're fundamentally trying to help you explore the world and to allow you to build a career at the same time. Hence, all of our properties have internet connected, so you can just walk in and start working. Depending on your requirements, you can see the speeds of the internet on our properties, and you can work out what's going to do the job. If you're a high bandwidth videographer, for instance, and you actually need 50 to 100 megabits a second speed, well, that's going to cut down on your options for that period of time. Or you go to somewhere which has just got an average speed and then use a nearby co-working space. So we've conveniently located a lot of our properties, or found properties, near co-working spaces. Because again, if you've travelled for any length of time, it can get pretty lonely. Your command of the language may not be good enough to get a real connection with the community. So nomad communities, startup communities, co-working communities are great ways for a new person to hit a new region, a new country, new town, and have an instant network of people that you can rely on to give you some advice and take some shortcuts. Because every country has pluses and minuses, they all do things differently. We've certainly found it here in France that the administration is completely different to Australia. In many ways very backward, and in many ways really quite forward thinking. But it just means that we spend a lot more time on administration. Now, if we can help you overcome some of that with connections and advice and understanding the ways, the loopholes, the opportunities are out there, well, great, because you can travel more, have more fun, and explore more of the world and live a richer life. So that's what we're focused on at Nomad Stays, and so we're looking forward to bringing more wonderful properties to you around the place. What have we got coming on board? Cancun just signed up, another place south of Lisbon. Portugal's going really well at the moment. New property in Uganda, in Kampala, another really fun part of Africa. Great people there in Uganda. Beautiful nature areas and wonderful national parks, and the Nile River, of course. We've got some great deals there in Montenegro if you're over on that side of the country and don't need to head back into the west, because they've got some, they've been sort of, I won't say black banned, but they're on the orange list for Europe at the moment. But there's some really great places right on the water for summer for a couple of €100 for a month. Unbelievable prices this year. Anyway, jump onto the website, go and have a look at it, see what you can find, and if you find a great place that's not there, please let us know, because we're looking for properties all the time. And in saying that, we're adding properties every day. New properties are applying. It's actually getting a bit of momentum going at the moment. So if you've got some great people that you think are really good hosts, love nomads, got all the right features and so forth in their properties for nomads, let us know and we'll approach them and see if we can give them some more money than what they've been making. Anyway, that's enough from me today. I'll leave you with the beautiful Rhone River Valley and the French Alps. And my Chief Happiness Officer there looking for another swim. I'll give him a swim soon enough. Light breeze playing, probably early 30 degrees Celsius. The river's looking wonderful. It's going to be another glorious day.